Today I'm going to make butter cookies. I'll put the list of ingredients and utensils you'll need on my video. You can pause the video, write them down, and then we'll get started. We'll start by leaving our butter out to soften at room temperature. Next, we'll measure out our flour, our cream of tartar, our baking soda, and our salt. We'll add our dry ingredients together, and then we'll cover them and set them aside. With our butter softened, we'll place it in our mixing bowl, and then we'll mix it with the mixer until it's light and fluffy. Next, we'll measure out our powdered sugar, and we'll add the powdered sugar a little at a time to the butter, and we'll mix it up after each addition because we don't want the powdered sugar to splash all over the kitchen. Next, we'll add our egg and our vanilla. Next, we'll start the mixer out slowly and then increase the speed so that we can incorporate the egg and vanilla into the butter and sugar. Next, we'll incorporate the dry ingredients, and we'll use the same approach, adding just about a half a cup or so of the dry ingredients at a time. We'll mix that up, and then we'll repeat the process. Once you've added in all the dry ingredients, you'll notice that the dough becomes very stiff. That's good. That's what we want. So you want to use a spatula and remove the dough from the beater. And then you also want to use a rubber or silicone spatula to clean down the sides of the bowl. At this point, if you wanted to, you could place the dough in a cookie press and make your cookies that way. But since I want to have rolled cookies, I'm going to put it in a container, and we'll leave it in the refrigerator for at least an hour. Make sure it's well covered. Okay, we've taken our cookie dough out of the refrigerator, and now we'll divide it into quarters. The sections don't have to be exactly equal, but what we want are smaller portions that we can work with and roll out while we keep the other portions in the refrigerator. We've laid out wax paper, and now we'll dust it with some flour. We'll remove one section of the dough, and we'll shape it into something like a disc to make it easier to roll out. With our other cookie dough sections in the refrigerator, we'll start to roll the disc out by again lightly flouring it, and then we'll place wax paper on top. Helps to have a heavy rolling pin as we roll out the cookie dough. We want it to be, I like to keep the dough at about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe just slightly less, but definitely not too thin. After we've rolled it out partially, you want to slide a spatula underneath, turn it over so we can make sure that that side doesn't stick to the wax paper. We also want to dust off as much flour as we can. Next, we'll place parchment paper on our cookie sheet, and then I'm going to cut it to fit. Now we'll take our cookie cutters, flour them a bit, and we'll begin to cut shapes. And we'll try to use as much of the dough as we can. as we cut them, we'll use our spatula and we'll transfer them over to our parchment-lined cookie pan. When we finish cutting out all of our cookies, we will wrap the cookie dough up, and this will end up going back in the refrigerator. And right now, since I have only about half a pan of cookies ready, I'm going to remove another section of dough from the refrigerator and roll that out. For this tray of cookies, I just want to use sprinkled sugar. So we'll go ahead and put the sugar on now before we put the cookies in the oven. After I bake these cookies, I'll create a separate tray of cookies without the sprinkles so that we can use the glaze on top, or frosting. Okay, now we'll put these in the oven. Alright, we've removed our cookies from the oven, and these will be perfectly delicious, even though the shape is a little bit different than what we put in the oven. So if you want them to look extra pretty, we can use our same cookie cutter, and while the cookies are still warm, press it down and leave it like that, and you can, for just a minute or so, for the cookies to set up. Then you can save those scraps for hungry children or grandchildren, or in my case, a dog. Next, we'll slide our cookies over to a wire rack to let them cool. Fluffy, Fluffy, come on. Come on. Up. Good girl. Before we make our second tray of cookies, we need to let our cookie sheet cool. It's always best to put the cookies in the oven with a cool cookie sheet. That way they will retain their shape better. We'll start by adding our vanilla powder to our confectioner's sugar. And next, we'll add the corn syrup. There's a little trick for doing that. We'll coat our tablespoon with some vegetable oil. Then we'll measure in our corn syrup. And it comes out of the spoon much more easily. Next we'll add our water. And we may need to add a little bit more than a teaspoon, but we'll see after we stir it how much more water we really need to add. Next we'll add our softened butter. And we want to make sure this is not melted, but that it's soft. And we'll stir that in. Alright, next we'll move our cookies into a plastic container, because what we want to do is dust off our parchment paper and reuse it for the next tray of cookies. So again, we're going to work with the next section of dough that we kept in the refrigerator. We want to shape it into a disc, or square if you like, but get it to a manageable size and shape that we can begin rolling it out. And we'll again put the remaining sections of dough back in the refrigerator. For this tray of cookies, we'll cut our cookies out as we did before, and then we'll transfer them on our cookie sheet, but we won't add the sprinkles. We want to keep a very close eye on our cookies in the oven, and as soon as the edges, or even before they become brown, we want to take them out. If you look at this cookie over here, it's a little bit shiny on the top, so we want to make sure that that goes away. And I've been baking these for 5 minutes, so we'll just keep a really close eye, maybe 30 seconds longer. Alright, our cookies are out of the oven, and while they're still warm, if you want to use the trim version, you need to do it at this point and work quickly, because we need for these cookies to be hot for us to apply the glaze. So again, you can do that now, but you probably want to put fewer cookies on the tray, on the cookie sheet, if you know that's what you want to do. So next, while they're still hot, we're going to put a dab of our glaze on each cookie, and we'll work our way around. Do that to every one. Okay, at this point, we'll spread our glaze around the cookie, and then again, while it's still warm, we'll put our sprinkles on. So we'll do that, we'll go around and do that for each cookie. And once we've decorated them, we'll transfer the cookies over to a wire rack and let them cool completely. So there you have it, homemade Christmas butter cookies.